to go from that place to a place where you don't know much, or you're a place of not knowing, to be a beginner again.
All of a sudden you're a beginner.
That is such a head trip if you're not prepared for it. And that was what happened to me.
So the road to invention is not always on the straight and narrow path. Sometimes it's a winding road. You are listening to the Late Bloomer Living podcast, and I'm your host, Yvonne Marchese. This week, I'm talking to Lou Blaser, editor and publisher of Briefing Notes. It's a digital newsletter about career resilience, longevity, and the future of work. Very interesting for these times we're in. She's also the host of Second Breaks, a podcast about navigating a changing world and thriving in our careers. So I'm really happy to have her on right now. I love her podcast, and I am a regular listener. In my conversation with Lou, we talk about how giving yourself permission to wander and change directions is essential to finding the path that's just right for you. So taking on a new adventure in midlife is not easy. Even if you've always been a confident person, it can cause you to question yourself as you take on the role of the beginner. We talk about imposter complex, ooh, good times. And Lou even shares her do-over notes. Very juicy. Let's go. So, you've kind of been, I'm a little starstruck, I have to tell you. Sorry, I know. I've been listening to your podcast for about a year, I think. And
thank you.
I love what you do. I really do. I first found you through What Works, through Tara McMullen's What Works. For anybody who's not familiar, I'll throw it into the show notes. I think where I found you was last August. I've really been like digging back to how did I even find you? Last August, she did a theme on confidence. And I think I remember the first thing that struck me about you was you talking about what a confidence shift it was for you to take on even thinking about podcasting.
Yes.
I think you had made a major, so you made a major change from a high level executive career, right? And went into your own business and then decided to start a podcast.
Correct.
And that is totally what I want to talk to you about, is that process for you from the moment of, knowing you're in a career that you need to change, and talk about like what that was like for you, that uncomfortable kind of hanky part of figuring that out. And then like what the process was like as you evolved into who you are now.
I would love to share that experience, because my story isn't it's probably not going to be one of the smooth career change stories that you hear about. There were a lot of twists and turns and plot twists in my story.
Yeah, great. Tell me all about it.
All right. So I guess let me just level set, right? So I was a corporate career person for a long time. That was the goal. I was happily climbing the ladder, so to speak, and going after that proverbial corner office. That was the goal, and I was happy doing that. I had no qualms about doing that. And in retrospect, I was, relatively speaking, successful doing that as well. I had ideas about doing things on the side, like writing was my big thing. I had this dream of writing a book or books, but I never really had like a big career change plan. Like I wasn't thinking of, I want to leave this and do something different. That wasn't in my mindset at that time. My last corporate role happened to be a very stressful one. I was leading a major reorganization in a large company that impacted people's jobs. And anytime you're impacting people's jobs, it's very stressful.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
And I was the face of that reorganization. So I was the one dealing with HR and legal counsel and the people. It was just very stressful.
Yeah.
And also, I was leading one of the newly reorganized divisions. So I had about 50 people reporting
Wow.
to me. I was responsible for them, and also a multi-million-dollar operational budget, new mandate, new expectations to deal with from the stakeholders. So, make a long story short, very stressful. But I wasn't complaining. I was a type A person, so I was working 7 days a week. Operating on little sleep, and I wasn't complaining. If anything, I was willing to take on more. But my body, my body was complaining. And there came a point that I hit the wall. There came a point where, the whole you burn the candles on both ends. That happened to me, basically. And there was a point when there was nothing else to give. And my doctors told me I gotta make some changes with my life, and that I needed to remove as much of the stress that I was dealing with as much as I can. So
wow.
the
And then
plan,
what do I do then, right?
well, initially I was like, okay, I'm gonna take a break. I'm gonna take a 3 months break. That would be fun. Like I had this condo in Florida, so I'm like, 3 months walking on the beach, eating seafood. Okay, I can do that. Sign me up. Exactly. Read novels. Sign me up. And then I said 3 months of doing that, and then I'll be back in the circuit, and it'll be fine, and I'll be raring to go and back to the old blue. But then 3 months stretched to 6 months to 10 months. And before you know it, there came a point I could not imagine going back to the corporate life that I was living anymore.
Wow.
I could not do it. And someone told me, well, what if you go back, but part-time? And I couldn't see myself even doing that, because I kind of knew myself. There is no halfway. It was either I'm going to be back, and I knew enough of myself that if I were to go back, it'll be the same as before.
Yeah.
And I just couldn't
What
see.
happened? Like, just to interrupt you for a second, when you got to under your 3 months, they're expecting you back, right?
Well, I actually resigned.
Okay.
So I said, I quit. I quit, and then I said, but I will go back to, like, I had headhunters and
Sure. Okay. So you were just looking to
all
shift
set.
positions.
Yeah.
Go with it.
And
Gotcha.
exactly. I mean, basically the same sort of career trajectory. And I had given my headhunters heads up, and I said, but contact me after 3 months, after 4 months, and I'll be back, and line up the interviews, and I'll be back.
Right.
But that didn't happen, like I said, because I just, I just didn't want to do that anymore, and I kept extending it. And also, during the time that I had taken the time off, I indulged with the other parts of myself that I had not been forgetting for a while. So especially the writing. It's not like I paint or anything like that, but especially the writing. So I went back to creative writing. I took a creative writing course again.
Oh, good for you.
So so I said to myself, I'm gonna give myself permission to explore these other parts of myself, and to see what else is possible. And I had some savings in the bank that I could I could weather this through while I explore. But I also wanted to do some work. So not just exploring for exploring's sake, but I also wanted to do some work. So a couple of people who knew me well suggested that, I've always been interested in career development. I've always been mentoring, coaching people on the side. Why not do that like legit? Like, why not be a career coach or career consultant? And so I said, okay, I'll do that. That's sort of like the first, I guess that was the first act of this of this 3-act story, is that the decision to okay, I'm not going to return to corporate life. I'm going to explore, and then I'm going to, I'm going to be a career consultant.
There you go. So I love that you say that you gave yourself permission to go back to something that was under there the whole time.
Exactly. Yeah. I kind of was thinking, if not, that if not now, when sort of
Mm,
question. Also, I was saying, I've worked my butt off all these years. I kind of earned this, privilege or this time. I earned this. I can do this. And
yeah.
like I said, I had some money in the bank that I could sort of like I could weather this, change for a bit. So yeah.
Yeah. So you started your career consulting business or career coaching business. Yeah.
Yeah. So here is probably just to kind of warn you. So here is probably where my story or, my plot diverges from some of the other stories that you're going to hear about, because it's not like for me, it wasn't like I decided to make a career change and so I jumped and voila, new career, new life, new me, and
Uh-huh.
sunshine all around. That was not my experience at all.
Okay. So what
So,
happened? You
so
got in and it wasn't all you had hoped it would be?
no, so one thing, you probably hear this a lot from people, like um, they're beset by fears, like they're stuck or they're paralyzed by fear.
Mm-hmm.
um that didn't happen to me, so I had no problem.
You
I had
seem
no
like somebody
problem.
who can move through fear.
Yeah. So but you have to remember, though, just to kind of put this in context, I was coming from a relatively successful place. Like I had this career that I was very proud of. And I had this narrative running in the background that says, I can do this. I could learn new things. I could I could do whatever it is that I want to do if I put my, heart and soul into it. So that was kind of like my thing. So I jumped full force and I did what I normally do or did then. And I trusted that I was going to figure things out
Mm-hmm.
along the way. And so I still believe that, right? So I still believe in trying things out, and
Mm-hmm.
trusting that you're going to figure things out along the way. So I absolutely still believe that, and I am an optimist by heart, and I'm someone who's very bullish on grabbing opportunities. But there was one thing that I wasn't prepared for, and that caused me a lot of like pain and suffering. So I was I was prepared for the fact that my earnings will suffer. So I was
Mm-hmm.
prepared for the fact that I wasn't going to earn as much as I was earning before. So I was prepared for that.
Uh-huh.
But what I didn't understand entirely was that when I moved to a new field, essentially I was starting over.
Mm.
And that, like, I say it this way and it sounds so obvious and like, of course, no duh, but it was such a head trip, like to go from a place where you kind of are confident about what your skills are, your
Yeah.
capabilities are, your level of competence, and to go from that place to a place where you don't know much, or your place of not knowing,
Mm-hmm.
to be a
Mm-hmm.
beginner
All of a
again.
sudden you're a beginner. That's
That is such a
fascinating.
head trip if you're not prepared for it.
Oh my gosh.
And that was what happened to me.
I think that has been something that's been a theory of mine kind of going into doing late bloomer living, is that you get to this point in life and
Yes.
you're really good at some things.
Yes.
Like you've got some stuff handled, right?
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden to hop onto a big change where you are suddenly a beginner, that is a massive mind shift
Yeah. Yeah.
that I don't
Exactly.
know if a lot of people are even willing to do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
And the funny thing is, I didn't realize what is happening or what was happening. So Joanna Penn, who's one of my role models, she's a writer. She's the host of this podcast called the Creative Penn Podcast.
Creative Pen. Yeah, I think I've heard you
Yeah.
mention her before.
I interviewed her. I've interviewed her twice now, but the first time I've interviewed her on the podcast, she said something in passing. She was talking about herself, and she said something along the lines of, when you're on top of a ladder and you move to another ladder, you're starting over because you haven't mastered. You're basically starting at the bottom of that ladder because you haven't mastered that ladder yet.
Mm-hmm.
And when she said that, like I said, she was talking about herself and her experience, and I was like, oh my God, that is exactly what was happening to me. And so as I was like, during that period of time, right after and when I say period of time, Yvonne, just to kind of level set, I'm talking about years. I'm not talking about weeks or months. I'm talking about, it took a long time. I was thrashing about and testing different things. And as I was doing that, which is all fine, thrashing about and testing things are all good things.
Yeah.
But I was getting more and more frustrated with myself because it was taking things. It took longer for me to do things because I don't know them yet, right?
Mm-hmm.
I haven't reached a level of expertise or mastery. So of course it took longer, but I wasn't there. I thought I had passed that in my sort of professional life. So everything was taking longer for me to do. The things that I were producing, they weren't of the caliber that I had expected of myself. And I'm, I am the kind of person who I used to always say this when I was in corporate. I don't say this much anymore, but I used to always say, set the bar high and then clear it. And that was kind of like my ethos. Mm-hmm. And so I set expectations for myself. I set goals for myself. And Yvonne, I missed those expectations. Like I did not hit those goals. I did not hit those expectations. And I started to doubt myself. I started to lose the confidence that I started with. So this confidence story of mine is a story of, I was confident and then I lost them. Like I lost that confidence little by little over a period of time because, as I was going through and learning, I wasn't understanding the phase that I was in the journey. And I was getting frustrated. I began to question myself. There were fears that I never used. Like I was never a procrastinator. And then all of a sudden I'm procrastinating. Like, who is this person? I was like, I was never this person in my corporate life. I was always told, like, I was an assertive person, never afraid to share my point of view. And all of a sudden I was gun shy. I was not showing up. I was second guessing whether what I had to say was valuable or if it made sense. I was losing my nerve. And, but the one thing though that I will say is, despite all of that, like all of that frustration and stuff, I never regretted the career change. So I never ever got to the point where I said, I should have never left corporate life.
Done? Right.
I never got there. No.
Yeah.
Instead, I was saying, just like, why can't I figure this out? What the heck happened to me? Like, what happened to where is my old me? Why couldn't I figure this out?
Do you think it was the shift from simply a shift from corporate culture and structures into all of a sudden you have to cover everything, right? Like I imagine within your corporate structure, there's silos, right?
Yeah.
And you're in your silo. And that's where you've got all that experience and all that skill that you developed over all those years. And now doing your own business and figuring it out, it's like you had to kind of like grow that base across all the stuff, the marketing, right?
Yeah.
Sales. Like, had you ever done any kind of sales in what you were doing before?
I did, but at a different scale. So I was a management consultant for over 15 years. So I did. So this was the other thing. So all the things that I said, I was going to have to do this. In the back of my mind, I said, well, yeah, but I did that. But it's different when you are selling something like your company, like at that time I was working with PwC.
Right.
It was different to sell the services of PwC versus selling Lou Blaser, right? And
Yeah.
selling my services. So there is that level.
Huge
But
difference.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But also I think that at the point when I was doing this and whenever you're doing a career change later in life, there's a certain level of it's kind of like a two-edged sword. So on the one hand, you feel confident about your abilities. You feel confident about your ability to switch, to learn, to apply new things. But on the other hand, you forget that sometimes it takes a long time. Like you forget how it was when you were starting your career, that
Mm-hmm.
when you were first baking a cake, it didn't take, you forget how it was when you were first starting something new. And
Yeah.
and,
And it
and that was what was
requires
happening.
it requires some grace.
Yeah.
Giving yourself the room
Yeah,
for
which I
that.
was not giving myself
No, it
at
sounds
all.
like it. Yeah.
No, no. Instead, it was just like frustration after frustration. Like two things happened in and around. So 2014 was when I decided to start a business, go off on my own.
Mm-hmm.
Into 2018, so it's been a long time that I was in that sort of like thrashing about and getting frustrated phase.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I joined so two things happened in 2018. I joined a mastermind group that was led by Tara McMullen, who you mentioned at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
So I was, for a period of 6 months, I was with a group of other women business owners, and it was a fantastic experience. But the overwhelming realization that I came up after that experience, and I didn't share this with Tara or the other women, but this was the thing that I realized, is that I was in the wrong business. Not that I was wrong in starting a business, but
Mm-hmm.
that I wasn't doing the thing that was right for me. The business that I was in at that time wasn't the right business for me. So that's what I came out of that experience with in the mastermind. And also, in and around that time, I started working with Tanya Geisler. Are you familiar with her?
I
Tanya
have heard her
Geisler.
name. Wait a minute. Didn't you just interview her?
Yes, I did. I
Yes,
did.
yes, that's right.
So she's the imposter complex expert guru person. She deals with that topic. And so back in 2018, I decided to work with her. And for the first time, I understood what was going on with me, because I never felt those feelings before. And I was feeling them now. And I understood kind of what was happening. And so those two experiences, the mastermind experience and the working with Tanya guys, will help me sort of understand what was happening, and also realize that I gotta do something, because otherwise it's not working. And if I keep hitting my head against this wall, the wall ain't gonna break, my head's gonna break. So
Right. And there's that whole sunk cost fallacy, right?
yes,
So all of
exactly.
a sudden you're like, well, no, but I put all this time into building this business now. And like, did you have a lot of that? Like, how can I
I
change?
had, yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. I had that. And also there's this Ryan Holiday says the ego is the enemy, because there's this thing, it's like, why couldn't you make this work? Other people were able to make this work. Why couldn't you make this work? And if you quit, if you change now, what does that mean? What does that say about you? So there's that thing too. But like I said, those two, the Tanya Geisler and Tara McMullen's mastermind, it helped me tremendously, and helped me gain the confidence again to go back to the drawing board. And it was funny. I literally went back to drawing board. Like I went back to my old notes from when I was first starting to think about creating a business or starting a business. And I looked at my old notes and looked at what I was thinking, what was I saying to myself that I wanted to create.
Mm-hmm.
And then I gave myself permission in 2019 to just explore that, to see what shape that will take, what form and how it feels. And then in the fall of 2019, which feels like ages ago because of COVID and coronavirus, but that was just last year. Right?
Oh my gosh.
So in the fall of last year, I decided to make a pivot. So it's a pivot because it's the same
Now you already had the podcast going, right?
Right,
So
right.
you
I forgot
started,
about that. Yes.
so
So
you
I did
started
have the
your podcast,
podcast.
and that was another shift for you, right?
Yeah.
I think that was the one that caught
Yes.
my attention, because I loved that you were like, who am I to be a podcaster, right?
Yes, yeah. Yes, I forgot about that. So yeah, so in 2017, so I am a podcast listener. I listen to tons of podcasts and I know how beneficial it's been to me. And so
Mm-hmm.
I said, well, why not start a podcast myself? But I was, again, I was scared. I was like, all those imposter complex feelings that I wasn't understanding. But then in 2017, I just closed my eyes and said, okay, fine, fine, fine. I'm just going to do this. I'm just going to do this. And I'm just going to prove to myself that I'm still the old Lou who can do something. And even though I was nowhere near confident, I was afraid of everything. I was afraid of the mic. I was afraid of like I hated my voice. I was afraid I was going to invite people and no one's going to say yes to being on my show. I was afraid no one will listen, all those things, but I did it anyway. So that was 2017. But then in 2019, I decided to pivot. So it's still the same topics because this is the topic that I love to explore, to talk about the future of work, resilience, career continuity, relevance in a changing workplace. These are the things that I'm very passionate about. And I still am serving the same audience, which are the experienced professionals like you and me. Except that instead of coaching or training or consulting, I am going to serve them. I'm going to deliver on the mission by providing highly curated information. So I pivoted the company or my work that I was doing.
And is that when you started the newsletter?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I decided.
It's fantastic, by the way.
I thank you. So
Yeah.
I decided, for better or for worse, I don't know if this is going to end up to be a good idea, but I decided to keep the name because I love Second Breaks as the name. But I decided to pivot basically the product, right? So the newsletter, the highly curated newsletter, and then the podcast also. So the podcast, the nature of what I talk about or the has evolved. And so I went from a week in, week out. So it used to be a weekly podcast where I interview folks about their career stories. And now it's a seasonal podcast. And every season I dive into a topic that's relevant to, the kinds of things that we are concerned about. So it could be future of work. It could be impact of technology. It could be resilience. In this case, the season that I'm developing right now is all about career continuity and resilience because that's what's relevant right now.
Yeah.
So again, like serving the same people on the same topics, it's just that I serve them differently. And I will tell you that this pivot is closer to who I want to be. And I know that's such a cliche to say that, but it's through trial and error that I figured out, like, this is who I want to be. This is what I want to do. This is where I want to make an impact. These are the things I want to master.
Yeah.
And I feel that this is where I could be of my highest contribution. But again, like I said, back in 2014, I didn't know that, right? And so I probably wouldn't have gotten here unless I've gone through all that.
Exactly.
Iterations.
I was just talking to somebody and there she said something she'd seen in a fortune cookie that has stuck with her all these years. We were talking about some of the little quotes, some of the things that we constantly tap into to keep going. Right. And one of hers came from this fortune cookie, which I'm probably going to butcher this, but it was like, begin and the rest will fall into place.
Yes.
And that's what you did. You started down a path, and then when you saw that you were coming to a wall, you are now shifting. And I think that's the thing that I think we all want, the nice, tidy story of, I did this, and then I had an awakening or an
Uh-huh.
epiphany, and I made that change, and everything was good, la la la, and
It's
happy
not.
ending,
Yes,
but
yes.
no matter what, it's going to be a process, and for me, it was shifting into photography. Going into photography was my first big pivot, and then about a little over a year ago, I made a change within my photography business to how I was going to do it and who I was going to offer my photography to. That was a huge shift for me. And all of it being, and this whole idea of the podcast was in my head for, it's probably been in my head for about 2 years now. I'm gonna guess. And I kept thinking to myself, no, not yet, not yet. I got to stay with the photography and follow that and
Yes.
focus on it. That I got to put my energy there and get to a
So
certain
good.
place with that before I can make another shift,
So
and
good.
but what's really there, I was, December of this year is when I realized, no, I have to move forward with this. I can't put it off any longer. And if it, and I'm going to try to do both and see how it goes, because I'm not ready to give up the photography. I love it,
Mhm.
but what I love about that, what the new pivot I've done, is it's really story based, and that's what the
Yes.
podcast
Yeah.
is telling people stories. And so I'm just still on this journey of like, what am I doing,
Yeah. Well, the great thing about that, Yvonne, is that you gave yourself the space to just, let it grow, like
Mhm.
the pivot to a different kind of photography, right? So you gave it space instead of um, oh, here's another bright, shiny object. Let me go do that, right?
Uh-huh.
And,
Uh-huh.
and so now that you're finally doing the podcast, it has a layer, or it adds a layer into your whole storytelling sort of journey. So
Mhm.
it's fantastic.
Yeah, because like you, I mean, I love. I know you're a book lover and I'm a podcast junkie. Oh my gosh, it's
Yes.
awful. It's a problem. um, I love it, and what? So here's a question for you. If you were to give advice to somebody who is in the middle of trying to figure this out for themselves, either maybe they don't know what they want to do, or they know what they want to do, but there's so many reasons not to do it yet. So I don't have the time, I don't have the money, my kids are still this, my parents, and but all the buts that come
Right.
up. What would be your advice to somebody to kind of get them over the hump?
So I have these things that I call do-over notes. So first and foremost, like I'll share a couple of them because I think they will apply as well. But the first thing that I would say to someone who is in that sort of phase is something I love saying, which is like you won't be able to figure out if you like the hat or not until you try on the hat. So you can't
Mm-hmm.
look at the rack and say, I like this hat. Well, yeah, but you had to put it on, try it on, see if you actually like it or if
Mm.
it suits you. So the thing that I would say is just give it a go and try it. It doesn't have to be a big major decision that okay, I'm going to do this and this is going to be my new thing. You could just try it. Just
Try
like
it on.
imagine that you're baking a cake and nobody has to know that you're baking a cake on the weekend. And so if it flops, it flops, right? So
Mm-hmm.
but give it a try. So having said that, then on top of that, I will share three of my, like if I were to do a do-over,
Mm-hmm.
these are the things that I would do differently. And I think, for that person who's going to give it a try, sort of like my way of giving advice. One is that remember the beginner's phase. Just understand that you're going to go through that. There's going to be a period of time when, I call the liminal period. It's between this is my past and this is the future, but the past I'm letting go and the future is just shaping and I don't know how it's going to look like. And in that in between period, it could be uncomfortable, but just know that you're going to experience that going in,
Mm.
and appreciate, because there is value in that sort of phase in your journey. Don't rush it. Don't like what I
Yeah,
was
don't
doing.
assume that the discomfort is a sign that you shouldn't be doing what you're
Right.
doing, but look
Right.
at it as building muscle.
Right, exactly.
Right?
And don't
Yeah.
rush it. Don't be like, because that was what I was doing. I was trying to get past it as soon as I could. But just
Mm-hmm.
there is value in that phase. And one of the things that can help you be in that phase, comfortably without, pulling out your hair, is my number 2 do over notes, which is build your support network right away, immediately. I didn't do that. So,
Mm-hmm.
the way that I would say it is like, if you move to a new country, well, you're gonna have to build relationships in that new country. Like, yeah, you want to hold on to your old friendships, but more than likely, your old friends are not gonna be able to help you in the new place. Right? So you have to build new, relationships in that new place. And I didn't do that.
I
I
love
did
that.
not do that. So I went for far too long without help,
Yeah.
I was trying to
That's
do it
my
on my
word for the
own.
year.
Oh God, yeah.
I don't know if you've heard that. Do you do like set yourself a word for the year? Have you
Yeah,
heard
yeah,
of this
yeah. What
idea?
is your word?
This is the first year I've done it, and my word this year is help. And
Yes.
it goes because total weakness of mine, I'm very independent. And
Yes.
I hate asking for help. Oh my gosh, it makes me so nervous. I feel like I don't want to be in any, but I don't want to take advantage of anybody. I don't want to, be beholden to somebody. It's so loaded for me to ask for help, and I'm realizing what a weakness that is.
Yeah, I 100% relate,
Yeah.
Yvonne, that because that was me. Like we get no points for being a martyr, trying to do everything
Nope.
on our own, right? And so, and I still struggle with it. Like now I say, get help sooner.
Mm-hmm.
But I still struggle with it. Like I still have to deliberately say, okay, Lou,
I
what's
think it'll be a
happening?
lifelong struggle for me probably. But
Yeah.
and then the
Yeah.
other aspect of that, of having help as my word for the year, is also because what I want this podcast to do is be a help to other people.
Yes.
So I'm looking to, I think on the other part of what I've realized about myself is that I'm trying to be a better friend in general,
Yeah. Yes.
and trying to be more available to people, to be a help to them too.
Yes. Yeah.
Because I do tend to like shrink into my little hidey hole, and just kind of go around doing my own little thing.
Yeah.
So yeah.
One of the Shannon Paris, who's the community manager at What Works at Work, I interviewed her for my podcast as well, and there was one thing that she said. She was talking about a time in her life when she was laid off, and she was in that in between and didn't know what to do next. And she was just sharing with people what she's doing and she's just asking, what are you up to? What are you doing? This is what I'm up to. And in that sharing,
Mm-hmm.
she was getting ideas, she was getting
Mm-hmm.
input, she was getting suggestions, she was getting feedback. And so in a way, like, it's you're asking help, but it's not like, oh, Yvonne, please help me. But it's just, I'm just naturally sharing what I'm doing. And if I were to do things over, that's one of the things that I would do is I just be
Yeah.
open. Like so for example, just, hey, I've started this podcast, or I'm thinking about doing this podcast, or like just sharing before it's quote unquote perfect.
Yes.
Before you're ready to share it with the world, just share what you're doing, and you'll be amazed at how many people will jump in and give you feedback or encouragement or input or suggestions, all the things that
Yeah,
can
I've
only
been
help.
kind of talking to my friends on Facebook about what I'm doing, kind of just putting
Oh,
it out there,
good. Yeah.
and sure enough, I mean, that has been happening. People are, have, I did a little shout out asking for a few people to help me out by just doing a little interview with me that
Yes.
wasn't for the podcast, but was more about like a seeking interview about what are the issues you're facing, where are you at right now, and just trying to get an idea of where people are at. And people are so generous with their time, and
Yeah.
other people are pointing me off to other people to talk to, and the more you talk to people, the more
Yes.
it's awesome.
You are so much better at this than me. It took forever for me to learn that because I was like, I don't want to ask.
Well, I've had to learn it through the photography business too.
Ah,
Because for so many years, the photography business for me was a side gig. I didn't do any kind of marketing, any kind of literally it was word of mouth. That's how my
yeah.
business built was I'd done photos for somebody and they told somebody, but I didn't ever really network, really put in, I wasn't looking at it like a business,
Yes.
and in the past couple of years, I've really had to take on what does it mean to be a business person and how do I even do that?
Yes.
Because
Yeah.
I don't come from a business background like you. I'm, you know, I'm a creative. I was an actress before I was a photographer and so all new to me. All new to
Yes.
me. I've been on like
Yeah.
a crash course and
New ladder.
new ladder, big time, and have had to learn how to ask for help.
hmm
Oh my gosh. Anyway, um, love that advice. And what you call it, the do-over. What is it again? Your phrase?
I call them my do-over notes. Like
Do-over
if I
notes. I
had,
love
if
it.
I could do things over, like if I had a mulligan, these were the things that I would do differently.
I so love that. I think I'm going to try to highlight your do-over notes in the show notes for people because I love that. And then, the other thing I kind of wanted to touch base on, and I think we have maybe a little bit, you've hinted at it, is on your podcast lately, you've been talking a lot about resilience.
hmm
And it's so timely with where we are right now. Um, I have a quote from your most recent newsletter. It says, "We have the opportunity to
Yes.
reposition ourselves within the organizations we work in and the communities we serve to upskill and reskill, to
hmm
reimagine how we can use our expertise in a changing economy to be more relevant than we've ever been." I love that.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
I 100% believe in that one. Yeah.
Yep, me too. Me too. The last recession was my first big pivot. That's when I picked up photography.
Mm.
And I think that this is such a key time for people to go in and really be um where they're headed next and
Yes.
how they want to weather this storm.
hmm
What do you think? Like what's a good game plan for people right now? Any ideas?
Uh, many, but the thing that comes to mind. So, okay, so let me just preface this by saying that this feeling of uncertainty, right? So we have this feeling of uncertainty, and just my experience is that we feel uncertain. We feel more uncertain when we're just sitting on the sidelines and watching things and waiting for things to happen. The
Mm-hmm.
more we are disengaged, as in not actively shaping our future, the more uncertain we feel. So number one, so we want to not sit on the sidelines but engage, because the moment we do that, then we have a we are participating in the shaping of what's going to happen to us. So that's my overall thing. But the thing that I really want to say is that the great thing about change, and we're all afraid of change. We are all afraid of change, or not wanting
Mm-hmm.
change, maybe is
Mm-hmm.
the better way of saying that. No one wants change for change's sake. But the good thing about change is that anytime there's a change, there are opportunities if you pay attention to what's going on. So I would say, if you are employed, get curious about what's your company doing, what is happening in the company, what is happening in the industry, what is changing. Figure out a way to, where can I raise my hand to volunteer, where can I uh, uh, so just to kind of give a couple examples, maybe you're a storyteller, right? So maybe you're an accountant right now, but you love telling stories. So maybe say, you know what, every Friday we're going to highlight someone's story on our weekly memo from the
Mm.
boss, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
volunteer to do that. And so you're showcasing a side of yourself that maybe they haven't seen, and who knows where that's going to lead, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
maybe you want to podcast, or you want to learn how to podcast. Why not suggest, can we produce an internal podcast when we're talking about
Ah,
like certain things happening in the
so
company,
smart, yeah.
at the same time that you are learning podcasting, on company time. Maybe they'll send you to training on their dollars
Right.
as well.
And you're bringing them huge value.
Exactly. You're bringing them
Something, yeah,
value.
yeah.
You're allowing them to see you in a different light, right?
Mhm.
And so you're expanding your skill set. You're jumping into roles that you may, if you want to change roles, right? Or, and you can do that. So that's what I love about change. If you are a business owner, I saw a lot of experienced business owners who very quickly reinvented themselves as soon as this thing happened. It was so fantastic to see what they're doing, right? To reapply their skill set in a different form. And that's what's great about being a small business owner, is because we don't have boards of directors who must approve what we need to do, right?
Yep,
So
nimble.
the company is a little bit different, but
yeah.
things like that, we can do that. We can harness. That's what I love about change. That's really, really what I love about change, is that we have an opportunity and we are at the front row seats. Like I always say, now we have this window. Granted, it's a big window and we're going to be here for a while. So it's not like the boat has passed or the ship has passed and we've lost our chance. No, we're going to be here for a bit. And the companies we work in, the industries we work in, the communities we serve, we are going to keep adjusting. And you're going to, if you stay curious and keep asking those questions, where can I lend a hand? Where can I expand my role? Where can I showcase, like flex a different muscle? You're going to participate in your future, in the shaping of your future. Let me get off my soapbox, because seriously, Yvonne, I can go on and on about this topic.
I love it. I'm like, keep going, girl. Keep going. I love it.
Because this is what I'm really passionate about. And this is what I try to highlight, both on the podcast and also on the newsletter. Is it this, like we have this.
And we live in amazing times. I mean, this is off the hook what's happening right now, but going into it, the resources that we have at our disposal, if this had happened like when we were kids,
yeah, oh my goodness,
oh my gosh, like
yeah.
what do you do? We're so connected via Zoom chats like this, via, you can learn anything on YouTube.
Yeah, exactly.
There's so many possibilities of being able, and there's so many ways to step into something where you can just kind of dip your toe into something and see where it goes. And there's no gatekeeper there to keep you back from doing it. That you can, if you want to start a YouTube channel, start a YouTube channel.
Exactly.
See what happens with it. Like there's so many possibilities.
And let me tell you, coming from that, like the ex, manager mindset, like I loved it when people just raised their hand, because you feel the pressure as the person in charge to come up with everything. So when someone raises their hand and say, hey, I know I can do this, right? I can start this, I could do whatever it is. It is so welcomed.
I bet.
Whether or not it's
I never thought of that when I was working someplace. I never would have thought that they would want to hear from me with some wacky ad hoc idea.
No, it is so. Let me tell you, and if in the end, even if you suggested, like, I could do this, I could do a brown bag lunch on Zoom to talk about, whatever, and even if they say no, let's not do that. But the fact that you raised your hand, let me tell you, they will remember it. I certainly remember those people.
Right, and they're going to think of you for some other project, maybe that they're like, oh, she's. Yeah.
This person is thinking ahead, is not, and is willing to expand, learn new things. I love this person. I'm going to do everything I can to, make sure that she is a good position going forward, that kind of stuff. So yeah, absolutely.
Very cool. Very cool. Thank you so much. So tell me a little bit about what's coming up for you next.
Okay. So I am very excited about the direction that Second Breaks Media is headed. So I'm very excited about the transition to a seasonal podcast where I can really get curious and can really dive into a topic. So I really love that. And I really love, more than anything else, the one thing that I'm really excited about is the Second Breaks newsletter, which is a highly curated newsletter. And the thing that I love about it is I figured out a way to to make use of my own nerdiness and my own love of reading and going down rabbit holes. And because I do this normally anyway, and I figured out a way to make use of that and make it and not just make use, but really leverage that, lean into that, and make it useful. So I scour through, all kinds of websites and journals and newspapers and magazines and books and podcasts and videos and what have you, so that I could select curate highly selected pieces of information along about the topics that you and I are concerned about,
and that are so
resilience,
timely.
future work, these things that we are all concerned about, right? And I can deliver that in a tidy digest every Sunday. So that is really, it combines my love of writing too, my creative writing, and like I said, I love going down rabbit holes. I mean, seriously, my perfect day.
It's such a problem for me, actually, because I can all of a sudden I'm like, I need to be actually doing things, and all I really want to do is go down that rabbit hole. And then that one looks good too.
Well, right. And so now I can do that, and I can research I could research away and know that it is for a purpose.
I can tell that you're on the right path, because I can see you're glowing. You're glowing. I love it. It's so cool.
So that's what I'm really excited about. And I've begun to sort of like but like pull in elements of the newsletter into the podcast. So just the creativity part of it, of being able to flex that muscle, I'm really excited about. So
very cool. So anybody who wants to check Lou out, she's at secondbreaks.com, right? And and you can find links to her podcast, and you can sign up for the newsletter there. I highly recommend the podcast, by the way. And I'll have all this stuff in the show notes for everybody as well. Thank you so much for being on.
This was fantastic. I love chatting with you, Yvonne. Thank you so much, and good luck with your podcast. I love that you're doing this. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be doing it. And I'm just so glad to have you on so early into it. All right. Yay. All righty then. I sure love talking to Lou. And I hope you guys found some useful tidbits in there. Since I spoke to her several weeks ago, she's since changed the name of her newsletter to Briefing Notes. As I mentioned earlier, I'll provide links to her information in the show notes on my website, so you can go deeper and learn more from her. So hey, listen, if you enjoyed this, please share it with anyone you think would also enjoy it. Subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already, so you don't miss an episode. And next week, I am talking to John Vaughn of Story Focused Media. He's got a great story. I think you're really going to like it. If you have a spare moment and you are enjoying the podcast, please take a moment to leave a review. That would be super helpful. And thank you so much. I'll see you next week.